Hey, welcome back to my channel. So today I had just finished smoking a cigar, was watching YouTube while I was doing it, and I saw a video from Thomann Music asking different YouTube people or different people in the guitar community who the most underrated guitar player was. And I thought it was an interesting video, and I just want to comment on it and make a few of the choices myself as well. You know, when you ask somebody who's the most underrated guitar player, especially to me, it's not just about who's the most technically proficient. To me, it has to do a lot with like how creative they are on the guitar and what they've done with it. Immediately, when people are asked who's the most underrated guitar player, people go a lot to the shred guys or guys who can play lead guitar. Somebody said David Gilmour, which to a point I agree with. He's really so musical and creative that he's fantastic. But do I think he's underrated? I don't. I think people know he's one of the greats. Some people, like Danish Pete, said Prince, and I couldn't disagree more with that response because I just don't think he's a great guitar player. I mean, he's a good guitar player. Is he great? Not so much that he's underrated. The people that like him think he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And I don't. I think he's a better bass player than he is a guitar player. And I think he's a great bass player. I think he's a good guitar player. So I wouldn't be on the Prince train. Bob Taylor came up with one of the answers that was one of the first that popped into my head, which is Paul Simon. I think Paul Simon's ability to put chords in that you're not expecting, that just have a beautiful melodic line. I think Paul Simon's absolutely phenomenal. Tommy Emmanuel said Jerry Reed, and Jerry Reed is one of my all-time favorite guitar players. I think he's one of the best country guitar players of all time. I put him above Roy Clark. I put him above Glenn Campbell. I think he's absolutely one of the greats. Is he more underrated than Brent Mason? I don't think so. I think Brent Mason is probably the most underrated country guitar player, just because people don't know his name. And that's another thing. It's like, who are we asking or who are we thinking about when we think of underrated guitar players? Is it that guitar players underrate or that the mass public underrate? Because most people don't know who Brent Mason is unless they're a guitar player. So, but again, he wouldn't make my list as who's my number one. So as I thought about it, I'm also thinking about creativity and how well they are into the ethos of everybody's head. Like everybody hears them maybe on a daily or a weekly basis, or at one time they heard them on a daily basis, and nobody gives them any love or the love that they deserve. So for me, my number one underrated guitar player, actually, I would have a tie. I would say that Johnny Marr from the Smiths, he also had his band Electronic. He also played with The. But Johnny Marr to me is a player that you could take a simple chord progression and he makes it unbelievably interesting. To the level of how I look at Jimmy Page, where he just came up with ways to play things and look at the guitar that I find just so creative and interesting and not easy to play. So Johnny Marr for me would be who I think is the most underrated guitar player. Again, because the music at one point was really out there and nobody talks about him. My other would be Martin Gore from Depeche Mode. Everybody knows Depeche Mode. Everybody knows the songs. They think of them as an electronic band. But the guitar riffs and the songs that are based around those, I mean, just what he plays in Enjoy the Silence, that line that he plays is so different and so interesting to me that I think he's underrated as a guitar player, and nobody really thinks of guitar when you even think of Depeche Mode. As far as other guitar players who are out there playing, like Uli Roth was mentioned, Uli Roth is one of the greats. Yes, a lot of people don't know who he is, and mainly that's because the Scorpions didn't really reach success in America to the great heights until Matthias got into the band, and Matthias is phenomenal. But Uli is a different beast altogether. Uli is one of the absolute greatest guitar players ever. But I think that guitar players who listen to him can tell that right away. In fact, Beyond the Astral Skies to me is Uli's greatest work and greatest guitar playing, in my opinion. But I do think that Martin Gore and Johnny Marr are just not really seen or mentioned ever as guitar players. And to me, they're super interesting. I would also throw in Robin Guthrie's name into the hat, but I don't, because I don't think Cocteau Twins were really into the ethos of what everyone was listening to, or most people don't even know the band. For me, he was super inspirational and really a huge influence to me because of just his ethereal playing and his choices and just how musical he was. But again, I couldn't put him up there as underrated because I just don't think people are exposed to him as much. And so therefore, it's not really fair. But Martin Gore and Johnny Marr for me. And listen, I started guitar. My big thing was I was a metal kid. I grew up listening to all the shred guys. Looking back on a lot of the shred guys, I don't love a lot of them as much as I did when I was a kid. I made that pretty clear throughout the years on this channel. But I do love a lot. I mean, we can't take away from how brilliant Paul Gilbert is. We can't take away how great Warren DeMartini was back in the days of Rat. Eddie Van Halen, of course. I mean, these were all guys who I grew up, they were my heroes. But as I got more into music and even different styles of music, you start to listen to players who I think just challenge you in other ways of just even thinking of the instrument. And to me, that's very important. That doesn't take away from, I mean, if I think about it, Alan Holdsworth to me is so underrated because the people don't know who he is and the average person doesn't know who he is. But every guitar player knows he's one of the absolute greatest person to ever touch the six strings. So for me, just to be on the record, I'm going to say it's Johnny Marr and Martin Gore. And please, in the comments, tell me who you think is the most underrated guitar player, so I can comment under your comment and tell you you're wrong. No, I'm kidding. I will. I'd love to hear who you think is, in your opinion, the most underrated guitar player. I think it's an interesting conversation, and let me know what you think. All right, everybody. As always, very good.